0 seconds. Vesuvius is the famous one. Every tourist knows the cone rising east of Naples, the story of Pompeii, the mountain that buried a city. But Vesuvius threatens Naples from the outside. Campi Flegrei is different. It has no cone. It's a volcanic caldera, a collapsed system roughly 13 kilometers across, sitting directly beneath the western half of Naples in the Bay of Pozzuoli. The city isn't built next to the volcano, it's built on top of it. Its most powerful known eruption happened 40,000 years ago. VEI 7, hundreds of cubic kilometers of material, pyroclastic flows across thousands of square kilometers, ash reaching Russia. For weeks, the ground beneath Pozzuoli has been rising faster. Earthquakes have been getting shallower and stronger. Gas emissions at Solfatara have intensified. Authorities began evacuating the red zone, believing they had more time. They didn't. And now the ground splits open beneath Agnano, inside the city. 1 second later. The eruption begins inside the urban landscape, not above it. Shallow earthquakes tear through the Solfatara-Agnano-Bagnoli area in rapid succession. Roads buckle. Buildings already weakened by weeks of seismic activity lose walls and stairwells. Long fractures cross residential blocks and industrial sites. Steam and volcanic gas burst through the asphalt. A section of road lifts, then collapses into a widening rupture. Drivers abandon cars inside tunnels and try to escape on foot through gas-filled darkness. Families who had been watching the evacuation unfold from their balconies, scramble back inside as the buildings start moving beneath them. People who ignored the evacuation order for days, assuming it was precautionary, are realizing it wasn't. 5 seconds later, the first explosion tears through the surface between Solfatara and Agnano. Superheated magma hits groundwater and flashes it to steam. The blast throws rock, asphalt, concrete, and volcanic debris kilometers into the air before most people in the surrounding streets understand what's happening. Buildings nearest the vent collapse completely. Roofs and exterior walls rip from apartment blocks further out. Vehicles overturn and are driven into facades by the overpressure. Gas mains ignite across several streets simultaneously. Crowds fleeing evacuation centers scatter as volcanic blocks begin punching through rooftops. People who pushed into metro stations believing the underground would protect them are finding the tunnels filling with heat and gas. 10 seconds later, Pozzuoli receives the earthquake, the blast, and ground deformation simultaneously. Sections of the city rise while others subside. Older masonry buildings collapse into narrow streets. Modern concrete structures crack as their foundations move in opposite directions. The waterfront deforms toward the bay, dock sections tilting, roads dropping toward the water. Entire buildings fall near the center. Cars disappear beneath brick and concrete. Residents trying to leave find streets already blocked by collapsed structures. Some break into shops for water and masks. Others stay beside ruins, digging with bare hands for relatives, while the column above them grows taller by the second. 30 seconds later, a Plinian column rises tens of kilometers above the Bay of Naples. The eruption enters its sustained explosive phase. Lightning flashes continuously inside the cloud. Pumice, some pieces the size of fists, rains across the metropolitan area. Visibility drops across western Naples as the sky turns black. Airport operations stop. Ships in the bay turn away from the coast. Electrical substations fail as wet ash coats equipment. Parents carry children through darkness toward transport points that have already stopped operating. Drivers attempting to leave through zero visibility create multi-vehicle crashes, blocking every westward route. The column is becoming too dense to stay suspended. 1 minute later, western Naples enters complete darkness. Ash and pumice bury roads. Engines lose power as filters clog. Rain mixes with ash and forms a cement-like layer on every flat roof. Older buildings begin failing under combined earthquake damage and accumulating wet ash. Roof sections collapse across Bagnoli and Fuorigrotta. Metro entrances fill with ash and panicked crowds. Traffic stops inside tunnels. Hospital generators overheat as ash enters cooling systems. Thousands of people have abandoned vehicles and are moving blindly through streets they can no longer see. Fights break out over access to buses and protected shelters. People inside weakened buildings refuse to leave because the streets look worse. They're wrong, and there's almost no time left. 3 minutes later, The first pyroclastic surge crosses the caldera. The lower part of the eruption column collapses. A turbulent cloud of scorching gas, ash, and rock expands outward faster than any vehicle or person can move. It enters Pozzuoli, Bagnoli, and Agnano simultaneously. Vehicles are pushed sideways. Trees and street furniture flatten. The cloud enters buildings through broken windows and ventilation shafts. People sheltering in tunnels and basements are overtaken by hot gas and ash. Windows and ordinary walls offer almost no protection at this temperature. Crowds running east are overtaken before they reach the next district. Police abandon roadblocks as visibility disappears. Behind the surge comes something denser. 5 minutes later, Pozzuoli is overwhelmed. Dense pyroclastic currents, ground-hugging masses of hot ash, pumice, gas, and rock enter the city from multiple directions. They follow streets and low ground while overtopping local hills. Dynamic pressure tears weakened structures apart. Material pours into buildings and buries the lower floors. Several meters of hot debris fill streets within minutes. Older apartment blocks collapse. The port disappears. Survival in exposed positions is no longer possible. People remaining in cars, weak buildings, street-level locations, and tunnels are killed by heat, impact, or suffocation. Rescue into the central city is impossible before it was ever attempted. 10 minutes later, Bagnoli and Fuorigrotta are destroyed. Successive pyroclastic currents enter these dense Naples neighborhoods without slowing enough to become survivable. Residential blocks lose exterior walls and roofs. Stadium and exhibition structures suffer major collapse. Rail yards and metro tunnels fill with ash, gas, and heat. Industrial facilities rupture and burn before being smothered. Entire streets become level plains of debris. Remaining evacuation convoys are overtaken. People inside stronger concrete buildings survive only in isolated interior spaces. Everyone east of the flow zone who can still move begins a spontaneous mass flight through central Naples. No signals, no open roads, no coordination, just people running. 20 minutes later, central Naples begins collapsing. The densest currents lose energy approaching the historic city, but destructive surges continue pushing through streets. Historic masonry fails under shaking and ash loading. Roofs collapse inward. Walls fall into narrow streets. Fires start where gas lines rupture. Modern reinforced buildings remain standing in places, but lose facades and everything below the third floor. Families try to move east through streets blocked by rubble. Crowds force entry into damaged churches and public buildings. Some steal abandoned scooters, only to become trapped in ash-covered streets. Others form chains to pull injured people from collapsing facades. Emergency numbers are unreachable. Hospitals in eastern Naples are filling faster than anyone can manage. 30 minutes later, the Bay of Naples is struck. Pyroclastic material entering the water and collapsing coastal sections produce destructive local waves. They hit a coastline already shattered by ash and earthquakes. Boats collide through floating pumice. Ferry terminals flood. Crowds who fled toward the shoreline expecting evacuation by sea are driven back inland by water surging through damaged facilities. The magma chamber is losing structural support. 1 hour later, the caldera starts collapsing. Ring faults rupture around Campi Flegrei. Large sections of Pozzuoli, Solfatara, Agnano, and Bagnoli begin descending. Not in a single clean collapse, but through repeated earthquakes and step-like ground failure. New vents open along fractures. Additional explosions feed fresh pyroclastic currents. Entire neighborhood blocks tilt together. Roads end at newly formed scarps. Coastal sections subside beneath the bay. Any survivors still inside the collapsing zone face renewed pyroclastic flows on top of repeated strong earthquakes. No rescue team can enter. Aircraft cannot approach. The eruption is reaching its most powerful phase. 2 hours later, massive pyroclastic currents spread across the Campanian plain. Repeated column collapses send dense flows tens of kilometers beyond Naples. Giuliano, Aversa, Afragola, Acerra, and surrounding districts are struck. Industrial parks collapse or burn. Sections of high-speed rail disappear under deposits. Agricultural land is buried under hot ash and pumice. Smaller towns are partly or completely overwhelmed depending on their distance and the terrain between them and the vents. Evacuation centers outside the original red zone are abandoned mid-operation. Military and police units retreat as flows cross boundaries that were supposed to be safe. Drivers trapped on rural roads abandon vehicles and walk. Some communities close access roads to prevent incoming traffic from overwhelming whatever local resources they have left. 4 hours later, the destruction reaches Caserta. Heavy ashfall surges and continuous earthquakes cause widespread structural failure across the city. Warehouse and commercial roofs collapse. Older masonry buildings lose walls and floors. The Royal Palace of Caserta, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the largest royal residences ever built, is buried under black ash. Hospitals operate without stable water or air filtration. Every route north is blocked by thousands of abandoned vehicles. Residents who were hosting evacuees from Naples are now evacuees themselves. People fight over fuel at the last open stations. Local volunteers open private homes to families arriving with nothing. Both things happen on the same street. 6 hours later, Rome enters the ash cloud. Fiumicino and Ciampino airports close. Fine ash reduces daylight across Lazio and contaminates transport infrastructure. Every motorway south of Rome has already stopped. Evacuation traffic from Campania is reaching Rome's outskirts. Emergency shelters in the capital are filling with people who have lost everything south of them. People queue for masks, water, and fuel. Some leave Rome before any official instruction, worsening congestion heading north. Others stand outside filming the darkened sky until breathing becomes uncomfortable enough to drive them inside. The eruption plume is entering European airspace. 12 hours later, European aviation begins shutting down. Fine volcanic ash moves across the Mediterranean and into the Balkans and Central Europe. Airlines cancel routes, aircraft already airborne divert. Major airports across Europe are overcrowded with stranded passengers who have no information about when conditions will improve. Ports and rail systems absorb the displaced traffic and they're not built for it. Families separated during the evacuation. Some escaped north, some are still unreachable, are trying to cross Europe by car and train to find each other. Transport prices rise sharply. The eruption continues through the night. 1 day later, Naples has ceased to function as a city. Pozzuoli is unrecognizable from the air. Entire western districts are buried under several meters of material. The airport is destroyed or inaccessible. The port is blocked by ash, floating pumice, and damaged infrastructure. Roads into the region end beneath debris. Hospitals outside the main flow zone are overwhelmed. Patients in corridors, car parks, and improvised outdoor triage areas. Medical staff have been working without sleep, without reliable power, without adequate supplies since the first hour. The death toll cannot be counted because the areas of highest casualties cannot yet be entered. Tens or hundreds of thousands may already be dead, depending on how complete the evacuation was. Families in shelters across Italy are searching survivor lists while knowing that some districts where their relatives lived cannot yet be reached. 2 days later, rain remobilizes the ash. Mediterranean rainfall mixes with loose ash and pumice and produces lahars, thick volcanic mud flows moving through valleys, drainage channels, and streets. Bridges clog with volcanic debris. Apartment roofs that survive the initial ash load collapse under wet material days after the eruption. Reservoirs and water treatment facilities fill with ash slurry. Roads just cleared are buried again. Residents who return too early are trapped. Emergency crews abandon clearance operations mid-task as Lahars shift direction. Shelters outside the immediate flow zone receive new evacuation orders. The ground beneath the exclusion zone is still moving. 3 days later, millions of people are displaced across Italy. Evacuees fill schools, stadiums, hotels, military bases, and rapidly expanding temporary camps. Most escaped with almost nothing. Documents left behind, medication left behind, people left behind. Hospitals across Lazio, Tuscany, Puglia, and northern Italy receive badly injured and chronically ill patients, transferred from Campania in whatever transport is available. Theft increases around the outer edge of the exclusion zone. Organized groups move through peripheral districts, stripping whatever can be carried. Simultaneously, thousands of volunteers distribute food, clothing, and transport without waiting for coordination. Black market accommodation and transport appear within 48 hours. Children become separated from relatives during mass transfers. Pets and livestock are abandoned across evacuation corridors. The Italian government is trying to redistribute millions of people across a country where every facility south of Rome is already overwhelmed. 5 days later, the caldera is still collapsing. Earthquakes continue along the ring faults. Smaller explosive phases open from new vents through the ruins. Previously, dry areas around Pozzuoli are now submerged. New steaming lakes occupy streets that were mapped and populated a week ago. Sections of coastline have moved or disappeared. Remaining buildings collapse during aftershocks. Authorities stop discussing short-term reoccupation of western Naples. The language shifts, not when people can return, but whether some of these places still exist in any form worth returning to. 1 week later. Southern Italy is paralyzed and there is no meaningful recovery underway. The central exclusion zone is too hot, unstable, and toxic to enter. Ash continues falling intermittently. Lahars repeatedly reblock cleared roads. Much of Campania has no reliable water or electricity. Naples is divided into destroyed, buried, heavily damaged, and inaccessible zones with no clear boundary changing quickly. Airport and port operations remain impossible. The A1 and every major transport corridor south of Rome is severed. Millions remain in temporary accommodation. Conflicts emerge over supply distribution and relocation priority. Families receive no confirmation about missing relatives, in many cases because the zone where they were last located cannot be searched. Thousands leave Italy entirely to stay with family elsewhere in Europe. 2 weeks later. Europe enters a prolonged ash disruption with no clean end date. Wind repeatedly lifts and redistributes settled ash across southern and central Europe. Airspace opens and closes unpredictably. Crops, machinery, and water systems across a broad area suffer ongoing contamination. Solar power output drops. Vineyards and orchards across southern Italy and the eastern Mediterranean are damaged. Supply chain delays extend into sectors with no obvious connection to volcanoes. Tourism across southern Europe has effectively stopped. Workers from Campania have no homes, no workplaces, and no timeline for when either will exist again. 1 month later. The main explosive phase is weakening. The consequences are not. Gas emissions, aftershocks, and occasional small explosive events continue from new vents across the ruined caldera. The exclusion zone boundary has barely moved since the first week. Lahars remain a recurring threat after every rainfall. Search operations continue only at the outer margins. The area is cool and stable enough to enter. The central zones where the highest death tolls occurred cannot be reached, and families have been told quietly that confirmation about some missing relatives may never come. Italy is facing reconstruction costs that cannot be absorbed without sustained European support. Millions of tons of ash cover southern and central Italy. 1 year later. The eruption lasted days. The geography it created is permanent. Pozzuoli is largely abandoned, buried, or physically altered beyond recognition. New lakes fill collapsed depressions where neighborhoods stood. Steaming fractures cross what used to be parks and housing blocks. A new volcanic landscape occupies the western outskirts of what was once a city of 3 million people. The few concrete structures that survived protrude from hardened ignimbrate, like markers of what lies underneath. Naples' eastern districts function unevenly. Western Naples is mostly inaccessible. The city's population is far below its pre-eruption level. The airport has not reopened. The port operates only partially. The most dangerous thing about Campi Flegrei was never the eruption itself. It was the millions of people who built their lives across it over centuries. On the assumption that the ground beneath them was stable. It wasn't stable. It was waiting.